Okay, it's time for another preview. It's preview number 6 this time ahead of the 2021 Overwatch League season, and that means we are moving back over to the East region where we are going to be joining up with the Guangzhou Charge for this one. So, Guangzhou Charge, they're a team constantly on the up. They were one of the second batch of teams to come in the 2019 season, the second season of the Overwatch League. In that season, they finished in 9th with a 15-13 record. Again, pretty darn good for a new team in the league. You can't argue with that. And then they improved on that massively in the 2020 season, despite the weird way that that season went. They ended up getting a 5th place finish with an 18-7 record, which is actually really impressive. They had a really good season last season, Guangzhou Charge, off the back of some really good additions to the squad, including some people like Krong, and it really helped them to cause a lot of surprises last season. I think people would agree with that. I don't think people expected Guangzhou Charge to be quite as good as they were, but they were right up there with the likes of, well, Shanghai at times. They really gave them problems, above New York and Hangzhou, Seoul, people like that. And I don't think that people expected Guangzhou to be there. But now, they have a lot to live up to in 2021. They have a massive platform to build off of. Much like the Florida Mayhem, they made massive improvements. Now, somehow, they've got to make that go a little bit further in an arguably tougher East region in 2021. And so, they've made changes to try and help with this. Some of these may be seen as a downgrade, some of these may be seen as an upgrade. So there are give and takes for this Guangzhou Charge squad in 2021, that's for sure. Now, first of all, there are big changes in the back room for Guangzhou Charge. They have actually got rid of all of their coaches, which is a very big move considering how well they did last season. So, Jin ended up moving out. He's now at T1. Tydolla's moved over to Los Angeles Gladiators. Sungwoo ended up moving to the Los Angeles Valiant, and, well, that didn't go too well for him when that became Immortals Valiant. And yes, I'm still running with that joke, sorry. And then Creed, moving over to the Chengdu Hunters, meant that the head coach and the 3 assistant coaches of the Guangzhou Charge were gone. Snapped like Thanos in the Avengers. But here we are, back again with a new coaching staff for the Guangzhou Charge. So they're bringing in Neko to be an assistant coach off of his player role. He was playing in Korean Contenders and is an ex-Overwatch League player alongside Damon, who is coming in as an assistant coach as well. I think this is pretty cool, actually, that they're bringing in people with playing experience, especially at the highest level, to be those assistant coaches. I think that's going to help the new players no end. And then the head coach is going to be Arachne, who comes in from the San Francisco Shock, with previous experience at Talon Esports, 2 teams that dominated their respective competitions. So, well, Talon Esports dominated the Pacific region when they were in that, and they did very well in the Gauntlet after that Pacific region season finished. Then he moved over to the San Francisco Shock. Well, the tale just kind of runs from there, doesn't it? They were championship winners, 2020, and Tydolla, I should say, Arachne was part of that coaching staff, alongside obviously Krusty and the likes, to get that title. So he has a lot of experience under his belt, and he's now coming in to be that head coach for Guangzhou Charge and lead the charge, I couldn't think of a better word, for them this season, alongside this fairly new look Charge roster. So let's look at this new look Charge roster then. We see a bunch of players going out of this Charge roster this season. So first of all, Chara will be leaving the main support. He's gone over to T1 as a coach. That's a pretty substantial loss for the Guangzhou Charge. Then we see Crystal and Weir leaving. They were two-way. Crystal didn't have, let's be honest, a great reputation. So that's not too much of a loss. We didn't see too much of them. Then we see Shu leaving. This is a massive loss. Shu is a great flex support. He's going over to the Los Angeles Gladiators. I think we will see Guangzhou Charge missing him quite a lot. Then we see Nero leaving. Nero's a difficult one because he's a great player, but he had visa issues. So we didn't see him feature for the Guangzhou Charge last season, which is really unfortunate. And then they lose the hitscan player Happy to the Houston Outlaws. Happy is a great hitscan player, and I think he will be missed by the Guangzhou Charge unless they can sufficiently replace him. But, I mean, is he one of the best hitscans in the league? No. Is he one of the better ones? Definitely. So it is a loss for the Guangzhou Charge, but it is also a fresh start for the Guangzhou Charge. So it'll be interesting to see quite how they cope with this new look roster, because they have brought a bunch of players in to replace them. But first of all, we have seen that they have kept hold of Eileen, Rio, and Krong from their previous roster. So it's still the same tank line, Rio and Krong. Rio on the main tank, Krong on the off tank. Krong was great last season. Big breakthrough for him. Eileen has always been really consistent for the Guangzhou Charge. Then we see them bring in a bunch of new players. So, first of all, the new support line for the Guangzhou Charge. It's comprised of the flex support Kareev. So Kareev, he has a history in the league, right? We've seen him on a bunch of different teams. And he has quite a pop-off potential. But very often he's not on the highest level of team, right? So it can be difficult for him to demonstrate quite how much potential he has. He is a good flex support, but is he as good as Shu? Arguably not, I would imagine. But he does have the skill to compete. And so it's not too much of a downgrade. But again, it kind of is a downgrade, if you see what I mean. I would take Shu over Kareev. So it is kind of rough, that one. And then we see the main support, and the main support coming in will be Mandu from the New York Excelsior. So that's an interesting one. To go from Chara to Mandu, you have to say that is a downgrade. Now, Mandu spent a lot of the time on New York Excelsior's bench last season, and he's a very young, up-and-coming main support. He came out of O2 Blast to come into New York. He didn't really make any waves with New York. He didn't look atrocious, but didn't look too bad. Now, it's not a bad support line. Is it as good as the support line they had? Not right now. Does it have the potential to be better than the support line they had? I don't really think so. Not with Kareev, anyway. With Mandu, maybe. But with Kareev, I'm not so sure. So, there's a debate to be had with this one. And it's a debate that could go on and on. However, we did see them in the next cup, back alongside Dallas, Seoul, and Shanghai, and this support line looked rather good. It actually did look rather good, and Kareev popped off quite a lot. Mandu was able to keep up with the rest of the roster, so he didn't look outplayed. He didn't look like he was being outplayed, even against the best of Asia. So, I think it will be a good support line. I don't think it's going to set the world alight. It isn't going to be up there with the Shanghai support lines and the Philadelphia Fusion support lines and the San Francisco Shock support lines and things like that. But it is going to be a fairly consistent one, which I think will see Guangzhou Charge to a fairly decent place in this season. As good as last season? I'm not so sure though. So, then we move on and we see the new DPS players coming in. First of these new DPS players is actually Chinese. He's coming in from Bilibili Gaming. This is Mike Cayley, or he was actually called Cayley, I believe, before that. And this is a really interesting player because Mike Cayley's a really flexible player. He can play hit scan or flex projectile. So he's known for his Ashe, Sombra, Pharah, Widowmaker, and Echo. Always good to have a really good Echo player on the roster. Although we haven't seen Mike Cayley play the Echo in the next cup. That was down to our next signing that we were talking about in a minute. So that was really, really interesting. But Mike Cayley is definitely a very good player. And he's had really decent finishes with Bilibili Gaming. No winning in China, we will say that, and that's not always great, but there's a lot of up and coming talent in China right now, and that shows with the power of the region when it's going up against Korea. So there's a lot of potential there. Mike Cayley is probably not going to set the world alight like Happy, but he's going to be good. I don't think he's going to be bad by any means, but I don't think he's going to be this insane player that's going to carry the Charge to victories and just be this ridiculously insane player. I think he's just going to be a nice, cool, consistent DPS player, and sometimes that's all you need. Especially when you've got pop-off in other regions. Kareev can pop off at times, we've seen Krong do it as well. So, in my opinion, very often it's better to have a roster full of players that can play consistently at a good level, rather than having half of a roster that is actually really not that good, and then having half a roster that is actually crazy pop-off and could be a much better team. Yeah, I'm looking at somewhere like the Houston Outlaws. That imbalance doesn't always lead to great results. If you have a good balance, at least you can get a consistent placing, which is something you want. That's something you want from a team. You want a consistent placing. You don't want I'm going to pop off in this tournament and then I'm going to be absolutely trashed in the next tournament. That's not going to be ideal. So yeah, I don't mind this pickup. It's not going to be the best pickup of the off-season, but it's going to be a nice consistent one. Now the DPS to go alongside Mycale will be Choicer 1. So Choicer 1 is coming in from Element Mystic. Element Mystic now is on a break and no longer competing in Korean contenders, which is unfortunate, but Choicer 1 comes in as this flex DPS player. And although he's coming from a very well-established team, he also had a time on Kongdu, and he's coming from an established team, and I don't dislike Choicer 1. But, and there's a but here, we saw him in the next cup, right? This is with limited preparation time. We must take that into account. But we saw him in the next cup, and he forced a lot of Genji, which is worrying. Although, when we saw him on the Echo, his Echo looked good. His Echo did look good. So I think Choicer 1, with a bit of guidance and coaching, will be actually a pretty lethal flex DPS player for the Guangzhou Charge. I think, however, it's going to take time for him to settle into the league. It's going to take time for him to really know what he can and can't get away with. Sometimes in contenders you can get away with not one-tricking, but being much more prevalent on a certain hero, even if that certain hero is not meta. And we've seen that at times generate a meta in contenders, and sometimes it finds its way to the Overwatch League, it depends. But in the Overwatch League it's very much harder to force a hero or a certain way of playing, because everyone folds into a certain, not rule set, that's the wrong word, but a certain way of thinking and a certain way of playing, and that's the Overwatch League way of playing. That's the Overwatch League meta. Very often, metas in the Overwatch League don't work anywhere else apart from contenders. So, yeah, if Choicer 1 starts to run this Genji and not really flex a lot, then it could become an issue. But if he plays more of that Echo, if he is very flexible and shows us that, then there's no reason why he can't do wonders. There's no reason why he can't do wonders. There's a lot of young potential in this Guangzhou Charge squad, and the last player we're going to talk about is the latest pickup for the Guangzhou Charge. This is them adding another main tank. This is them bringing in the ex-London Spitfire main tank Jihan. So Jihan actually retired after leaving the Spitfire, and I was kind of sad about that because I thought Jihan actually had, when he had time and the ability to show his gameplay for London last year, looked better than J-Mac, especially on the Orisa, and he's known for his Wrecking Ball. And I like Jihan, and I thought he was given a harsh time at London last year. And he went off, played a little bit of lower level stuff, and has now come back with the Guangzhou Charge. Now, almost certainly this is going to be a similar situation like the Boston Uprising. And you've got Rio, who's going to be in for a lot of Winston play, a lot of general main tank play, but then they want to play Jihan when they want to play more Wrecking Ball. Now, Wrecking Ball has been much more prevalent in the meta in the past year or so than he's ever been before. And very often a meta can revolve around Wrecking Ball. We've seen it a lot recently, and I think a lot of the teams are hyper aware of this. And that's hence the pickup of Stand 1 at Boston Uprising, the pickup of Jihan at Guangzhou Charge. They want to make sure that they are well equipped for whatever the meta might throw at them. And we've had some crazy tank metas recently. We've had double off tank, double main tank. Orisa Reinhardt is actually pretty popular on some control points right now. And then you've got the Wrecking Ball, and the Wrecking Ball can do all sorts of things. And we've seen that even prior to Wrecking Ball metas with the Chengdu Hunters. So, again, it's a very good option to have in your back pocket, and this is what Jihan is going to offer the Guangzhou Charge. He is not a top-level main tank, but he is the flexibility that the Guangzhou Charge need to be able to cope in all metas. Rio's Bull is not great, let's be honest. So, that is where the Guangzhou Charge have filled a hole there, and I really like that. It's clear that the coaches are thinking ahead and making sure they're not going to get caught out, and that's essential, because we've seen it before, Houston Outlaws in the inaugural season not having a great Tracer player, getting caught out in the meta, and it costing them dearly. So the good teams will make sure that they're not going to get caught out by any metas. And it's something that may fall foul even in some of the best this season. That's all I'm looking at you. So, anyway, that's the roster for Guangzhou Charge. Eileen, Rio, Krong, Kariv, Mandu, Mycale, Choicer 1 and Jihan. And now we're going to look at the up-and-coming fixtures, the first 6 fixtures of the season for the Guangzhou Charge in the East region. And it's not easy. It's not easy for the Guangzhou Charge, but a lot of these fixtures aren't going to be easy for the Guangzhou Charge. None of them are going to be not a lot of them are going to be like, oh, they're 3-0 on paper for the Guangzhou Charge, easy peasy lemon squeezy. No, that's not going to happen, because in my opinion, they're a middle of the pack team. And so most of the games are going to be close if they're going to win them. So the first game of the season is against Shanghai Dragons. Now that is rough. That is rough to be going in first of all against the Shanghai Dragons. I believe that ended 3-1 against Shanghai in the next cup. They did take a map, but it was the map where Shanghai kind of messed with the roster a little bit. So that's tough. Or was it 3-0? No, I think actually it was a 3-0 for Shanghai. I wouldn't expect Guangzhou Charge to win that. I'm not going to lie. Shanghai are going to be still very, very good this season. And so we're expecting them to do very well in the East region. And that's kind of that. I don't think Guangzhou Charge have the raw quality and skill to compete on the level of the Shanghai Dragons right now. It's all about keeping in touch with them and getting into those playoffs at the end of the season, because in a playoff scenario, who knows what's going to happen? Look at Seoul last season. So, yeah. Then, talking of Seoul, we have them in the second match of the season for the Guangzhou Charge. Now, this is a coin flip, simply because you don't know what Seoul Dynasty is going to turn up. Seoul Dynasty have a habit of not doing too well in regular season fixtures, but the format of the season this year is going to be very different with that four tournament format, 4 games leading up to that for qualifications. So they do count a lot, and tournaments are going to mean a lot because of the extra points it gives you. So Seoul are probably going to take this regular season much more seriously than they did last season, and so I would expect Seoul to win this. Again, this is a 3-1, I believe, in the next cup for Seoul, where they lost the only map they lost was Anubis, where Guangzhou Charge played Rio. Kariv popped off big time, pocketing Rio on the Winston, but the big elephant in the ring was that Seoul weren't playing Prophet. They were playing Sabiobi and Fitz, and everything. Every time I think we've seen that, pretty much, they've lost. So, again, I wouldn't expect a Guangzhou Charge win there, but they could sneak something. Then, in the third match of the season, they had the Los Angeles Valiant. Now, this is... I said Los Angeles Valiant, I apologize. Immortals Valiant. This has to be a 3-0. Because the Valiant, they're not expecting to win anything. They're going to be bad. That's almost a certainty. So, Guangzhou Charge really need to pace the Valiant. Simple as that. And Valiant shouldn't be picking up maps. Simple as that. And I'll say that for every single team in the East region. Valiant should not be picking up maps. They shouldn't be. So, it's going to be very... I'm going to treat the Valiant very, very similarly to how we treated the Shanghai Dragons in Season 1. They should not be picking up maps. You should be 3-0ing them. You need it for your map differential. You need it for consistency. And so that's what they need to see out. In matches 4 and 5, they're going to play Hangzhou Spark twice. Now, the Battle of the Electric Boogaloo, I actually love these games because I really like Spark and Charge. I especially like Spark. I've always liked their branding. But it'll be interesting. On paper, Hangzhou Spark had a lot more depth and a lot more quality. When we're looking at people like Godsby, we're looking at people like Sumin Sunao, Shai. So there's going to be a lot of quality in that Hangzhou Spark squad with them bringing Grugeray and stuff like that. They should be able to outdo this Guangzhou Charge squad. But Guangzhou Charge can make this very close against Hangzhou, because Hangzhou, they are a team that I sometimes wonder whether they're going to do as well as on paper they should do. They've got a great roster, don't get me wrong. They've got a great roster, but will it hit the heights you'd expect it to? And that's always the question we're asking of Hangzhou Spark. Last season we thought they could have done better than they did, really. Let's be honest. You would expect, with the amount of quality they have on this roster, for them to be top 7, at least. Will they be? Only time will tell. So, I think these will actually be very big teller matches to know exactly where they fall, because I'm expecting Guangzhou Charge to be in the middle of the league. I'm not gonna lie. I don't think they'll do as well as they did last season. But the last out of those 6 is the New York Excelsior. Now, this is the battle of the potentials, because New York Excelsior have done a very similar thing to what the Guangzhou Charge have done, brought in a new load of potentially good players. And although they do have Ivy, and they still have Jonak, there's still a lot of inexperience in that New York Excelsior squad. And so this should be arguably the most even of matches out of these 6. Hangzhou Spark should have much more chance of beating Guangzhou Charge. Guangzhou Charge should pace the Valiant, then Seoul and Shanghai should get fairly easy wins against Guangzhou, but New York versus Guangzhou should be fairly close. It could be a real tasty match, that one. And there will be so much new potential and new skill on show in that match. It'll be an incredible watch. So that's a tough one. And I couldn't call that one. I honestly couldn't call that one. There is incredible new potential on both teams. So yeah, it's interesting. Guangzhou are not going to be the best team in the East. That's obvious. They've got Philadelphia Fusion in there as well. But can they stick with them? Can they stick with the Shanghais, the Seouls, the Hangzhous, the Philadelphias? Can they make those teams think? Or are they going to fall behind the Seouls, the Shanghais, and the Hangzhous and the Philadelphias? That'll make them bottom half of the league overall. And that's not going to be where they're going to want to be for the overall playoffs. So it'll be a teller to see quite how this squad gels together. It's going to be interesting. It's got some really good experience to it. It's also got some really useful enthusiasm in it as well, and willingness to do well. So there's a lot to prove for this Guangzhou Charge squad, and it's going to be up to the completely new coaching staff at Guangzhou to really knit this squad together and get them running fast. Because if you fail pretty miserably in the first two tournaments, then you are going to have a tough run back. That's for sure, especially in the East region. So that's the Guangzhou Charge. It's going to be, yeah, interesting to monitor the Guangzhou Charge over the coming season, definitely, with all the changes they've made. We're also going to be continuing with this series. Obviously, next up will be the Hangzhou Spark. That is going to be bumper packed because that's a 12-man roster, I believe. And that is going to be a lot of looking at because they've signed a lot of players, a lot of changes at the Hangzhou Spark. And a team that is very difficult to call it sometimes. So yeah, it'll be interesting to take a look at them in the next one. And then obviously after that we have Houston, and then we'll move on to London. But yeah, super interesting. We're really cracking through these now. At the end of this series, there will be a power rankings once more. And that'll be interesting. I can't wait until those power rankings, because now we're actually getting an idea of it. And guess what? The Valiant still don't have a roster yet, so who knows where they're going to be ending up. Probably 20th. Anyway, I'm going to be leaving it here for this one. All the socials are linked in the video description as per usual for Illusion Gaming and myself. But for now, thank you guys so much for this video. If you'd like to give a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video. See you then.